Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I am Jim Nettles, and I'll be your host this evening as we're talking about romantic historicals during the holidays, love through the ages. And tonight with me, I have three very esteemed authors, or we're just going to be, having a little bit of fun tonight. So go around and let them introduce themselves. So Piper, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Piper Huguley, and I'm a writer of historical romance, one contemporary romance, and upcoming historical fiction.
Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna MacMeans. I think I'm best known for my Victorian historicals, but I also do some paranormal. But mostly what I do is I write fun. I mean, doesn't matter what the genre, what the year, I like fun.
Hildie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Hildie McQueen, and I write medieval Highlander romance. It's around the 1600s. And I also have some Westerns that are 1860s that I write in. So I write almost all historical romance.
So I think that's a good place to start. Let's actually talk a little bit about what you guys are writing. And what periods of time, kind of maybe some of the influences, what pulls you to those periods of time. So Piper, I will start with you.
Well, I cheat in writing my historicals because I only write the historical time period in which I'm expert in as a consequence of the day job. So that is late 19th century in the United States and the early part of the 20th century in the United States. So yeah, that's what I do, and I'm not really looking to do anything else because I'm lazy.
Piper, what's your day job?
I'm a professor, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an English professor, so very often these days, if you have a certain literature that you're teaching, you have to now for the young people discuss history because they don't know it. So yeah, increasingly, yeah, it does. And increasingly over the years, I've had to talk more history, almost. It's gotten really, yeah, it's gotten to be a lot. It's just young people nowadays, they don't know much about it. Mm-hmm. And once they realize that it's not boring, then they really get into it. But sometimes, somewhere, they've been taught that history is boring, and I really don't understand why that is. I can't tell you how many times somebody would come up to me, when I'm teaching, like, say, 19th century United States literature. Oh, that's boring. No, it's not. Well, so now the students, they call it historical tea. So it's cute. Give us more historical tea. Yes, but did you do the reading?
Donna, what about you?
Oh, what was the question? I forget.
That's a good question. What periods do you like to write in? Kind of what are those influences and why?
Okay, I write Victorian, but mine are set in England, which I don't live in, so I wouldn't say that I'm an authority. And I got started on it mainly because someone bought one of my books and they said, we want more. So I have been writing pretty much, I've got 2 series now set, and the latest one is the Rake Patrol. And it's set with just upper late Victorian. My period is 1890s for this, for the next 2 books, I'm in the 1890s. I remember when I first sold my first one, my publisher said, we don't want anything past 1900. They said that it wasn't historical if it started with the 19. So I have been staying in the 1890s as close as I can get. But I love it. I love it. I started this, my first book I started was as a contest entry. And the person that was putting on the contest, Lori Foster, was putting on this contest. And all you had to do was submit like 10 pages. And it had to have a lot of sexual tension. And I came up with an idea that was really good, but I thought it was going to be contemporary. You could enter in contemporary or historical. And I really liked the idea, but it had to do with the striptease. And if you do a contemporary, we don't wear enough clothes to have a story based on a striptease. So I looked at the period where the women were wearing the most clothes, and it was during the Victorian era, with all the corsets, the sexy corsets and the multi-layers of clothing. So I started researching and writing in that period, and I loved it. So that's what kind of led me to the Victorian period. And I rather liked all the restrictions that I had to deal with back then. I mean, you couldn't whip out a telephone, a cell phone, if you found yourself in trouble and call for help. So I like it. So I've been staying there. I've been writing, all my books are set there.
What about you, Hildie? I can imagine, not only do I already know the answer, but I can imagine from the background you've got, there's a very specific genre that draws you in. But what would you like to?
You know, I don't know what it is about these Scots. You'll never guess by my background, will you? Honestly, I was writing a different genre when I went to Scotland, and I had no intention of writing Scottish historicals. And then I fell in love with Scotland and the men. And I'm not saying it in a, creepy way, but they were just such great guys over there. I have all these stories of things that happened that just seemed like they would never happen here. And so, I was at the train. I was getting off the train, and myself and my friend were carrying these big suitcases in Edinburgh. And all of a sudden, these young guys came by and took our suitcases. And we're like, oh, okay. If you were in America, you'd be like, they just stole our suitcases in broad daylight. And when we got to the stairs and looked up, they were standing right there waiting for us with the suitcases. Have a good day, ladies. And then we're like, oh my God. They're just so nice and so sweet and so, that accent,
were they wearing kilts?
I wish. I did stop and stare at a guy that was wearing a kilt that was trying to open his garage. He probably thought of this dirty old lady.
I was surprised.
My phone.
But I went to Scotland when I was writing. One of my Victorian historicals was going to be set in Scotland. And I'm sitting here and I'm writing it, and I realized I'm describing Ohio.
Oh.
And so that doesn't work very well. So I told my husband that night, I said, I need to go to Scotland. And yeah, he said, that's not on my bucket list. I don't want to go. I said, I didn't say you had to go. I have to go to Scotland. And I can go by myself. I get along with people, I can have someone drive me around, but I need to go to Scotland. So he thought about it. A couple of days later, he said, well, I don't think that's a trip I want to miss. So we did go to Scotland. But what surprised me were the number of men in kilts.
Yeah, you don't expect to see them.
Yeah, just on the street, just walking around.
Yeah, well, that's their dress. Yeah, so, and it was just like, not only that, but I ended up actually staying in a small fishing village in the Highlands and got to go to Skye and all that. And so then I decided to do research, and I have been writing Western historicals, which were based in the 1860s. And the reason I wrote that is because after a while, I knew enough about that I didn't have to research every time I wrote a book. So as I was doing research on Scotland, I found out that in the 1600s, there's a big space of data, like the history of Scotland through the 1500s or so. It's very precise. Everybody knows what was happening. And then there's a space in the beginning of the 1600s where it's kind of muddled. Like, well, that's a good place to go because those history buffs won't jump on me. So I decided to write the 1600s. I do have all my Scotland books on the proper ways and things, the ways things are done. But even in my this book's behind me, the Clan Ross of the Hebrides, that they take place in the early 1600s. I have made a disclaimer in the beginning of the book because I have moved clans around and they get to do a whole bunch of stuff on the Hebrides. And back then there was hardly anybody living there. So in my case, there's battles and and all this other stuff. But yeah, I pretty much try to be historically accurate up to as far as what can happen during those times. But I'm hoping that I think that that's a safe era for me as a not fully schooled person in that time frame to write.
So looking at playing with the historicals, and because we are here to talk about the holidays and the historicals as well. So looking at the time periods and whatnot, what kind of holiday stories have you written and done in your periods, and how have you played with the holidays in some of your storylines and your different series? So Donna, I'm going to pick on you this time.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I was part of a group that was writing an anthology of Christmas stories, and they're all set in a castle, a Cayman castle. And oh no, that's another story. This is when I was writing a Christmas story. It was set in Scotland. I had the idea for the story all set until I realized that in my time period, they did not celebrate Christmas in Scotland. Right. So what the heck am I supposed to do? So I had to do some research to find out how I have my English heroine is up in Scotland, and actually she's a dowager at this point, and she's kind of lonely, and she's missing her Christmas tree and whatnot from the Christmas that we all celebrate, and how she had to adapt to the ceremonies and whatnot of the Hogmanay, I think is how they say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, celebration for the new year. So that would be one way. Had to develop my holiday, put my people in.
Hogmanay on the first footing.
I'm sorry.
I said Hogmanay on the first footing. So you walk the property every year.
Yeah, that's what I learned, and that's what's in there. It worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well. But that was kind of a shock when I went to go write that, and I went, oh no, they don't do Christmas trees and all that kind of.
It was outlawed for a long time, wasn't it, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
It was out for a long time. It wasn't until the 20th century, I think, that they started celebrating Christmas a little bit more like we do. I don't know if they truly embrace it as much as we do here in America, but it was pretty late until they started picking it up.
Well, and I mean, in terms of the historicals, and you guys are going to, of course, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we look at Christmas and a lot of those holidays around that period of time, they were not celebrated anywhere near the way we do until things like the Christmas Carol came out and other things that started to really sort of reshape it, and also the Industrial Revolution,
right,
kind of brought in a lot of Christmas and some of these kinds of holidays because we were able to start commercializing them.
Well, Queen Victoria brought in quite a bit too because of her husband with Albert and the Christmas trees, because those weren't really a big part of Christmas before then. So, but we have lighting the houses. We have colored lights. We laid our claim to fame on during Christmas season.
What about you, Hildie?
Well, I've actually gotten to research the holiday season a lot more this year because I was asked to be part of an anthology. It's called Star of Light. We did 2 anthologies with Dragonblade Publishing, one is Star of Wonder and Star of Light, and they're out right now, but and they are available right now. And the Star of Light, I wrote one that's called Highland Night, and that one includes Hogmanay, and part of that, them planning to go to the Laird's house because the hero is the Laird's cousin, and the hero and heroine end up going for the celebration. And then the book that follows the eagle, which is right behind me, is called The Fox, and that one is coming out in December. So for that, I did Yule, and I really had fun because one of the brothers who normally doesn't attend celebrations is dark haired, and for first footing, the person that walks through the what is it called, threshold, has got to have dark hair, and I forget what he's carrying. He's carrying something that's significant for the celebration of Yule. So I had one of the prior heroes walk through and be the guy that does the first footing that brings the good luck for the following year. So I've had fun writing the holidays into that. But like Donna said, when you're asked to be in a holiday anthology, you're like, well, I'm Scotland and we didn't have Christmas, so can I write a different holiday? Because I mean,
What about you, Piper?
Well, my historical Christmas novella was part of a continuity series based on the 12 Days of Christmas in Colorado in 1876. So it was a mail order bride series, and we each got to pick one of the 12 Days of Christmas. And so the conceit was that in order to save the town, a certain number of couples had to get married to show stability in the town. So the hardest task was for the first person, who was the partridge, to get arranged for them to be married in a day, because wow.
If you don't like him, you can kill him off. It'll be fine.
Yeah. I was number 7, the swan, so I came somewhere there in the middle. In terms of that, and really, in terms of the Western United States at that time period, the whole aspect of Christmas, right? Queen Victoria's influence was beginning to come in, but it was more of a religious holiday. In terms of that. And so there were certain aspects in the continuity, but there's not a lot of ostentatious description of, lots of decorations and all of this other kind of stuff. But my heroine did sing Silent Night, which had come over to the United States by the way, but it was in the German version of it. So yeah, that's my one. My one holiday story. I'm currently working on a contemporary Christmas story, so there'll be more stuff because, like I said, all of this other stuff in terms of traditions and stuff has really gotten stuffed into the holiday, whereby people don't even know what it's about anymore.
exactly.
Well, since we are talking about history, of course, what's the best part about being a writer? It's not getting words to paper. It's what kind of rabbit hole can I go down? So when I'm doing my research, ooh, shiny object, and you forget about, I may have to work this into a story, but it's the ooh, shiny object. It's the fun thing. When you were working on the research for these holiday stories, what's the one thing you saw that you were like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to include this? Or what was the kind of the thing that surprised you when you were doing your research along those lines? Kind of what was the what was the big surprise from the rabbit hole this time? So Hildie, I'm gonna start with you.
Well, I think mine was the first pudding, because I had not, even though I had written holiday stories, I guess I had concentrated mainly on trying to make it more Yule and gifts, whether or not they did gifts and how they celebrated and what they ate. But I didn't really go until this time deep into the traditions and what each tradition meant. So like I said, when I read about first pudding, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a good way to bring in one of the past heroes, because I like to bring in characters from before, and I wasn't quite sure how to bring this guy in. So it was kind of a surprise to everybody, when not only to me, but to everybody there, when he was the one that walked through the door. So I thought that was just really cool, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, then I ended up looking at what other people did and how they celebrated, if they still do that in Scotland now. What else do they do that I could probably incorporate in stories before? And before you knew it, I was like 2 hours gone down the internet just because of that. But it's really cool when you find out these things that you didn't know, even about United States. I have to tell you guys a story. When I wrote historical Westerns, I was writing, I don't know, I think it was a Christmas story. It was either Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I asked my husband to read it over, and my stories took place in Montana, and my husband is from Montana. And he's like it. It was a novella, it was short, it was for an anthology as well. He goes, but they could be eating turkey. And I was like, I didn't know that they didn't have turkey in the Western United States until when, like 1950s or something? 20th
century, yeah. I caught somebody's historical mistake too that way, where they were eating turkey.
Yeah, so I was like, what? No turkey? It was an Eastern United States thing. So even in our country, there's stuff in historical that we learn that is not available, as far as foods and how they celebrated holidays, because that stuff was not available. So
here's the question: what were they eating?
Pigs or cows or whatever. Yes, it's whatever they killed. I guess there was no wild turkeys.
Yeah, I won't mention, the article that popped up as I was doing some research yesterday about the White House, and the fact that at one point, the Thanksgiving meal was raccoon. I think it was.
Are you serious?
So that there's a new rabbit hole for you.
Oh, there you go.
All right. So what about you, Piper?
Well, I didn't realize when I signed on to do this one, I kind of backed myself up into a bit of a corner, because the Swan is a passing story, but the plot that's involved is that it's this young woman who is passing for white and joins the mail order brides. But when she gets to the town to meet the groom who signed up to marry her, he is also passing for white, but in order to deflect any tension from him, he loudly proclaims, no, I'm not going to marry her. She's Black. So he outs her in effect. So that kind of puts an end to that. And what upon research, I realized is that interracial marriage in Colorado was illegal until the 1950s.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I had to figure a way out of her predicament in order to get her a new groom and to marry, because all of these brides had to get married in order to provide stability for the town. So yeah, I fortunately was able to back my way out of that. But yeah, that was a little research nugget that I discovered that was like, wow. Mm-hmm.
It's better you found it out than a reader tell you.
True. Yes. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't know what I knew. That's not going to work. I mean, and some people, they didn't take offense to what I had to do in terms of resolving it, but it played into the realities of what the life of someone who's passing for white would have to do. So yeah, that's it. It was a very realistic ending as opposed to a romantic ending. So she could get her HEA with some other dude.
Some other dude.
No, she was not going to marry that dude. It had to be some other dude. Yes.
Well, at least you had a week to do that in, 7 whole days.
Exactly, yeah. Yes.
Why am I picturing this as the reality show of the 1800s?
Yeah. Married at first sight.
So what about you, Donna?
Well, I have a daughter who gives me every gift-giving opportunity. She gives me research books about the Victorian period. I mean, I have tons of them. And I picked up one and I started thumbing through it, reading through it. And it was talking about in Washington, D.C., back, I believe it was 1870s, 1880s, that on Embassy Row, that you had to be, the person who was going to be in charge of the embassy had to be married. Because if he wasn't married, the women, all the wives of the other ambassadors and whatnot, could not come to that house because it was a bachelor's house. And I thought, this is so cool. What they would have to do, there was one ambassador that was coming from England that was coming, only he wasn't considered an ambassador. His place wasn't that big, so they had a different name for him. But he had to get permission from all the wives on Embassy Row that he could have his niece, who was raised in a convent and could speak English, but she was more fluent in French, that she could be his hostess and live in the house. And he had to get permission. And they all said, sure, yeah, that'll work. And she ended up being a huge hit. But I thought this was kind of cool. So in that in my story, which is Redeeming the Rogue, I had an Irishman who was actually working for the crown English crown. And he was searching out a murderer who had escaped to America. And he had murdered the ambassador there for England. And although the Americans were saying it was just kind of an accident, that the ambassador was there at the wrong time, wrong place, the English thought, no, I think there was something else going on behind there. So they were going to send my hero over to investigate, but he was going to pretend to be the new ambassador, but he wasn't married. And they set him up with my heroine, who's trying to get out of town for other reasons of her own. And she goes and she's supposed to teach him how to be a diplomat so he could pass for a diplomat while he's over here in America, but they're not married. And he was supposed to, he had hired an actress to pretend to be his wife, but then it turned out that the actress was not a very good person. She's more like a spy, and they had to get rid of her, which forced my heroine to step into that role. But anyway, it was just an interesting fact. I mean, I used to live in Maryland. I've been on Embassy Row, and I had no idea. So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of cool. But yeah, those rabbit holes, they are deep. I mean, just when I was first writing my first historical, just figuring out how women had to get dressed, all the clothes, what order it went, how the corset had to go over a corset cover.
Yeah, watch those videos. They're like 15 minutes, and the entire time they're getting dressed.
Oh, really?
You know,
Really?
they have a lot. There's such a video channel that shows you the different countries and the different time periods, and you watch them getting dressed. And I'm like, holy moly, how did those women breathe?
Yes, how did they do it? I mean, and then they change clothes. It seems like their entire life was changing clothes for dinner or changing clothes
in England during Victorian.
In England. Well, that's all my stories are set in England.
Yeah. I don't think the Western people or the American people did as much of the changing of costumes.
I was thinking with this latest controversy about books that are considered appropriate, I'm afraid my entire library downstairs would be on the ban list, because all the clothes I have about what goes on underneath what. Underwear is a topic that's not spoken of a whole lot in any context for any period. So you have to find the books to research, because in a romance, you're going to see that underwear. It's just the way things go. So
oh no, the clothes just disappear magically. Next thing you know, they're rolling around, leaving a trail of clothes. I love writing that because I want to visualize it, but you're thinking it wasn't that easy.
But it's interesting. It's fun.
If you're in a kilt, it's much easier. Never mind.
Yeah, and I don't think the women wore it that much to keep. They both had to lift their skirts, and voila.
So, looking at the story, so let's talk a little bit more about about the stories, and really kind of what drew you to really write the story. So Piper, you're talking about, you had the swan and how you went down the story of passing for white and all of this. What really pulled you to write that story?
You know what it was? It was my Harry and Meghan story when I thought that they were not going to be allowed to marry in the royal family. Turns out I was kind of right, but that was the seed of the idea. So my heroine Avis resembles Meghan Markle a lot, and my hero Liam is a ginger like Harry is. So that is what inspired me, and I was just feeling very determined that I was going to let them have their happily ever after in some way. And so there it was in the last week of December in 1876 in Colorado. I mean, and the other aspect of it too is that, I hadn't seen very many passing stories or in terms of mail order bride kind of stuff, in terms of that kind of deception from an invoices author. So it really did give me an opportunity to explore that issue, where as in my other two series that I have, that wasn't something that I would have had the chance to write. It is the weird other thing about it was, because it was a continuity where other characters from the other books would pop up in each other's books, we all had to read each other's books and make sure that all of the descriptions and everything were compatible, that it was smooth or whatever. And so that was a very interesting exercise in terms of making everything weave in smoothly in and out. And especially, I think I had a harder time of it being in the middle that way. So if I couldn't get, the one-day couple, then I did have to work a little harder, I think, in terms of weaving Avis and Liam both in and out in the way. He owned the general store, so people would go into the store and stuff like that. And there would be these issues of whenever people who knew that she was of this race or not, were they amenable to having her wait on them and all of this other kind of stuff. That.
Yeah, I was going to say you picked a couple of slightly challenging topics between the mail order bride.
Where were the swans?
Where were the swans?
Well, Avis means bird.
Okay.
Avis means bird, so she's a swan.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other swan type references.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a very elegant neck.
Yeah, she does. I know that. And Liam is, of course, short for William, which means protector.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a Western historical that for the same theme of the 12 Days of Christmas, and I got the three. What is it? Three
Wise
French
men.
hens.
Three what?
Three
French
French
hens.
hens,
Yes,
yeah.
and I ended up writing a Scottish heroine that she kept running away, and her dad threw her in the back of the wagon in a cage with 3 chickens. And when they got to the keep, they wanted the guy that she really liked came up and asked her why she was in there with chickens, and she said because they were her pets. And so he helped her find a place and put a little corral for the chickens. At this point, her dad can't do anything because that's the laird's son, but he was bringing the chickens to be cooked, and now the chickens are being taken care of, and they show up in inappropriate ways, like whenever this girl was trying to seduce him that wasn't a heroine, and she threw the chickens in the room. And so her interrupt them. So I had a lot of fun with them.
I can see how that would fly. Or not.
But I had fun with my theme. I know they weren't French hens, but they were chickens.
Yeah, everybody had their fun with their particular themes and stuff. And we started calling each other. Hey, French hens, what's up?
I know, right?
I see it now for the anthology release. Everybody has their shirt with their story and
oh yeah, the little emblem. I have to say, Piper, though, you said that you had to read each other's books. I feel sorry for whoever was the 12th person, because at that point you're like, got all these characters.
Well, and the other aspect of her was with Elizabeth, she had gotten a little bit too much into, how there's kind of, it's not a trope exactly, but it's a thing that happens whenever it's in the wintertime and the heroine falls into some kind of body of water, and there's a way to keep her warm, but that he has to get completely naked and lay next to her.
Of course he does.
In order to warm her up. But see, this is like, there was this whole thing about, well, what is G-rated or what is sweet, what's going on, because that's what's supposed to be. So all you were like, oh, I don't think like you, because we were getting her copy of her story. It's like, I don't know about that. So that was a harder time for her, was to try to figure out how she was going to
get the naked guy
warm, instead of the hero getting naked and letting all of his muscular body warm her.
thought that was the point.
She cared less about the other characters.
Jim, you better reel us in, Jim.
No, I'm out of the way.
Because I'm thinking of the 12 ways to keep a naked man from being naked.
A naked muscular man. Just give me any naked man.
Coming soon from Continual, our holiday calendar. So what about you, Hildie? What brought you to write this story?
I think mainly because I was writing the series Clan Ross of the Hebrides, and I wanted to write this book, and I knew that I was going to be released in December, so I wanted to involve the Hogmanay or Yule celebration in there somehow. And I decided that because the one before was the beginning of what was going on with the holidays, this one was totally more closer to the new year. And I just thought the whole thing was really interesting, and I did just look it up. So first footing is somebody that brings, let me just see this, it's the first footer will usually be bearing gifts, and they come with a coin, bread, salt, a lump of coal, and whiskey. And it stands for representing all the things that the new year will hopefully bring. And coin is for prosperity, the bread is for food, the salt is for flavor, the lump of coal is for warmth, and the whiskey, well, for good cheer. And so I thought that was so cool. So I'm like, like I said before, and not only was it a cool tradition to bring into the story, but then I could use one of the heroes and make him show up and do that. So that was the one. And the one for the anthology, our theme for that was Christmas carols, the Star of Light. And so I picked Silent Night, and I called my book Highland Night. And on the night that they are there at the keep, and I had fun with it because neither of them are like higher elevated in social status. Although he is a cousin to the laird, he's just a blacksmith, and she is a healer. And so they're kind of, I didn't have to worry about where they stood socially and all that stuff. So one of the things he wanted to show her, because he really didn't have any money or anything to give her a gift. I guess he could have made her something out of iron, but anyway, he walks her out to his favorite part when he grew up there at the keep castle, and showed her all the stars. And at that moment, they noted that they had gotten away from all the celebration and the noise of the music and everything, and it was really, really quiet as they looked up at the stars. So that's how I made it a silent night, and I thought it was just a really sweet scene. And I don't remember if they get naked. I think they do, but not there in the cold.
I was gonna say, if you
it was too cold.
That's what wool is for. So
Yeah.
what about you, Donna? What brought you to write your tale?
Well, my Christmas tale, what brought me to write this particular one that just came out as a standalone, was for an anthology. It was for the anthology with the castle I mentioned earlier. And I thought what I would do, I had no idea what to write for this story. So I asked my readers, I put a poll in my newsletter and had them vote on who they would like to be the hero or heroine in this story that I was going to write. And I tried to pull somebody from each of my books. And I kind of had an idea who I thought would win. And I was totally wrong. The person that won the poll was this guy named Ben, and he was in Redeeming the Rogue, the book I had talked about earlier. And he was kind of like a street kid in London. And the hero takes him along with him to America, and he shows up in the book at different times. Didn't have a real story of his own. So now I have to do a Christmas story with Ben, who, he's not, he grew up on the streets, pickpocket, that sort of thing. So I made him, as we all know, a lot of times with the novella, it's sometimes easier for them to fall in love with somebody that they knew before, because you're limited in your word count. So I figured the someone he knew before would have also have been on the streets. And I made his heroine be the sister to his best friend as they were growing up in the underground of London. And so my story kind of worked out that way, that they had a meeting, they get reunited back at Christmas time. And it's a story kind of almost like a Cinderella story. Turns out he's kind of looking for his parents. There was a clue that brought him to this castle, and she was there, working in the kitchen or working in another capacity at the castle. They meet. There's his best friend, her brother, has been murdered. He actually is the one before he's murdered that kind of brought them together. And it just has some twists and turns in it. That was a lot of fun to write. So that's what brought me into that story. But what's kind of interesting is that in that story, there were a few artifacts. There's a medallion that the hero wore that he always wore because it was with him from birth. And there was a bracelet that the heroine, he bought for the heroine at the end of the story. It's a little heart on a bracelet. And so the name of that story is her heart in his pocket, because she's a pickpocket. And she pulled the chain out. But what's interesting is I'm back writing, it's not a Christmas story, it's a New Year's story. But all the Christmas decorations are all up. And it's set in the same castle. And I thought I would use as the heroine is an ancestor or a descendant of my first two characters. And she's the one that ended up with these two artifacts, the medallion and the bracelet. And she's bringing them back to the castle to donate to the castle where they'll be more valued. But for some reason, that story ends up, she accidentally brings a gargoyle to life.
Oh.
And my story is called Dancing with Gargoyles. And she has this gargoyle that comes to life and tells her at the very start of the story that she's got 5 days. He's going to be there for 5 days. And at 5 days, he turns to dust, returns to the earth. And he's there to resolve her problems. Only she doesn't know of any problems that she could possibly resolve. It's a fun story. It's a laugh out loud story. But to add to the mystery is today. I don't know if you can see him. Let's see. Can you see that? This showed up in my house. This came to my house to me. No note, no return address. FedEx just delivered it. It's a little gargoyle. I have no idea who sent it.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Beware if it starts talking to you.
I know. Walking around,
A little creepy.
I have my suspicions, but I'll have to see. I think it might be, I think the box that it came in was from a shop in Oklahoma. I've got a niece out in Oklahoma. And I think maybe I had put a little snippet of the story in my newsletter as a little tease factor, and I think maybe that's where it came from, but I don't know for sure. It could have been any of the other people in the anthology,
That's cool.
True.
Well, knowing a few people that write for Canham Castle, I'd be worried it might come to life, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm looking around my room like, what could come to life in here?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. So looking at, kind of all the fun stuff and the moving parts of all these different stories, what's the thing that you want the person that picks it up and reads it, what's the thing you want them to take away from it? How do you want them to feel? What is it you want them to, when they come away, especially from the holiday perspective? But if you look, what's the thing that you want the reader to really kind of take away as the gift of the story? So Piper, I'll start with you for this one.
It's a romance, so that love is possible, even in the most strenuous of circumstances. And it's this one actually features, of course, romantic love, but other kinds of love that are involved in it too at Christmas time. Mhm.
Oh,
So sweet.
It is sweet in that. So,
What about you, Hildie?
I think the main thing that about this story, The Fox, is the fact that no matter what season, I mean, what year or whatever, the same thing happens. That time of holidays is a family time. So the entire clan comes together and they celebrate more being together. And, they're all happy at this moment, regardless of what's going on in all the different lives, because there are situations going on. But during this time, you put things aside, brothers that were not speaking to each other and things like that. And people come together and just enjoy the holiday and celebrate. And I think that's something that regardless of when we live as humans, that comes across. And it doesn't hurt it that there's a love involved, and you're kind of waiting to see what the different couples are going to be doing during this time. So you kind of through the eyes of the hero or heroine, as they look around, see how the other people are interacting with each other during the special time.
What about you, Donna?
well, there's not a lot of reality, nothing that's really going to happen, at least in this latest story. I want people just to laugh. I want people to feel good. I want them to know, again, because it's romance and it's everybody's happy at the end with the man and the woman that they want. Sometimes it's hard just to feel good about the times that we're in. And I want them to pick up this story and have a good time with it and just love it, just to turn in the pages. That's what I want. I want happiness. I want laughter.
Well, talking about happiness and laughter, what's the thing that you guys are looking forward to this holiday season? I mean, obviously, the last couple of years have been a little challenging, but what's the one thing that you guys are looking forward to for this holiday season? So who wants to go with that one first?
I will. Let's start off. I'm at the point in my life where we're downsizing our house. And so my husband and I are kind of looking for something smaller. Our kids are all raised in this house. These houses were built to raise kids in. So we've always had a big Thanksgiving here. And this is the last big Thanksgiving and last Christmas. So I'm looking forward to seeing family again. We didn't last year. Mm-hmm. But everybody is vaccinated and boosted and whatnot. I'm looking forward to having the whole family here. I think that'll be great, but it'll also be the last time that they're going to be here. And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. The end of an era, the beginning of a new
chapter.
Yes, a new chapter, but it's going to be fun to see everyone again.
I think I'm looking forward to family getting together, but mostly because I was raised in Mexico, so a lot of our traditions are very different. And so it's always funny to me how we come together with this year. It's not going to be as international as most years, but there have been times when we've had Brazilians, people from the Dominican Republic, and then my family all come together. My husband was born in Germany, but he's American. But he makes me laugh because sometimes we just have these crazy themes for our meals, and it's just, I don't know. I'll always look forward more to the interactions than anything materialistic, because like you, Donna, I think we're all at that age that it's like stuff is just stuff, I'd rather just have time with friends and family and enjoying that kind of stuff, and then kicking up with a nice glass of wine and reading some of these books that you guys are writing. Forward to that. Taking a little break to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Piper?
Yeah, I'm my last day in the classroom in person was on Tuesday. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, is not being in the classroom. So
they would just learn to listen. Oh, wait, sorry.
But, so my time off. That is what I'm looking forward to.
What grades do you teach?
College professor, so.
Also, they don't listen either.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, and I just said we'll just do the rest of the class online because coming back after Thanksgiving, I don't think is a good idea. So, yeah.
That's I am tired of y'all and your stuff. I don't want
Yeah.
to see you again.
You either know it or you don't.
There you go.
So I'm gonna throw one more question at you before we start to wrap up. Of the holiday traditions that you guys have found, it may have made it in the book or not, but is there a historical holiday tradition you found that either you have or you'd like to pull into your family traditions for the holidays? And Piper, I'm gonna make you go first for this one.
One of the things that I know that my family would do that I need to do more often is just try to pull in something that makes you realize or appreciate the smaller things. So it's like all of these years, my mother would always give us that lifesaver book of candy rolls.
I love those.
I know, and we would get my sister and I would be like, "What is this?" You know.
I love those.
Until my mother told me like what that meant to her. So I really need to think more pointedly of something that was poignant. Historically speaking, that kind of thing would be something like an orange, which back in the time was like an exotic fruit and not just an everyday thing that we see, you know. So yeah, I have to think more about that. But you know, here in the 21st century, there's so much around us that it's hard to narrow in on that kind of thing. Yeah.
What about you, Donna?
Well, I don't know if this is a historical tradition, but a number of years ago, I heard about the pickle, about hiding the pickle ornament or hiding the pickle on the Christmas tree.
Well, that's German,
And
isn't
so
it?
I told my kids that I had probably one of those lifesaver books set aside as a prize for the person that found the pickle. But my kids came in and they practically tore the tree apart searching for the pickle. And I thought,
My goodness.
this is the last year. This is the last year we'll do this. And my son has always asked, is the pickle on the tree, so he can start hunting for it. But that's about the only thing I can think of. If there is a tradition that I find that I like, I did incorporate some years ago the little poppers that they use in England. And we had those for our Christmas celebration. A lot of gunpowder smoke going over the table then. But I can't think of any that I've really incorporated into our home.
See, I think you're going to have to bring
everything else.
I think you're going to have to bring back hiding the pickle at least one more time.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially since
Oh, I
it's your
tell you,
last
it
time.
was just a
I was
rampage.
about to say that.
I mean, we are talking romance here, so
Exactly.
I'm right, so I don't usually end up with that kind of thing, but yeah.
Maybe you can hang it up on the mistletoe, hang a pickle in the middle.
Well, you see them now. You can see at the stores, they sell pickle ornaments.
I know, and I
And now
never
you
knew what it
know.
was for until I read somewhere about it being a German tradition or something. I think
I'm
it's-
not too sure where it came from, but
yeah, well, alcohol was involved.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sure, yeah.
That's one of the best traditions of the holidays. Is alcohol. Bourbon.
What are you doing, Jim? You got to tell us what you're doing.
That's a good question. That is yet to be determined.
good.
No, we're actually so for Thanksgiving, we're going to my sister's, and we've not done Thanksgiving with my family for a number of years. In fact, we've not even been able to do Christmas all of us together all the time for the
Aw.
last couple of years because So we're doing that. But for Thanksgiving, we're going to go run down, do Thanksgiving at my sister's, and then on Friday, good friends of ours here they do theirs on Friday. So we're going to go over and join them for Friday.
Double dipping.
Look, this is not all beer, okay? This is
That's pretty smart.
the downside is normally I do a lot of cooking, especially for Thanksgiving. Not just for me, but for a bunch of friends and other stuff like that. And for the second year in the row, there's just not a whole lot of it going on. So that side of it to me, in terms of tradition, for me is always a lot of cooking, and I'm not doing all that much. So it's kind of like,
Well, you can do it Saturday. Then you can have Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
So Saturday is the Carolina Clemson game.
Oh, goodness.
And so we're trying to figure out where we're going to watch that at, whether or not a bunch of us are actually going to get together and watch a game together for the first time in years.
There you go. You can mix the turkey and stuffing for that.
So, if we do that, then I'll wind up doing something. But I mean, it won't be like the years where I've had to. I think the record is still having smoked 14 turkeys, fried 14 turkeys.
What?
Done a dozen hams, done about 100 pounds of barbecue.
Oh my God.
And how many people? 3? How many people were supposed to consume all this?
Okay, I'll tell the story because, well, hey, somebody left me in charge. And I told it on the food story that I think aired today. But we were we were cooking Thanksgiving dinner for all of my in-laws and all this sort of stuff. And my wife's grandmother's sister died, her great aunt, and the two of them lived together. So they weren't in the mood to come down. And I said, okay, well, I've been cooking for 2 days at this point. Now, obviously, not all of that stuff was for us, because I mean, it was one smoked, one fried for us, a ham, and some of the barbecue and stuff. But I was like, and she goes, well, Mom just called and said they're not coming, because I'm like, okay. And I'm sitting here going, I've been cooking for days. I said, why don't we carry the stuff down there? And she looked at me and goes, why would we do that? I'm like, well, I'll go with the one answer that comes to mind that'll get me in trouble, which is it's the right thing to do. With the answer not coming out was the one that says, I've been cooking for 2 damn days.
Somebody's going to eat this.
Somebody's going to eat this, or we're going to be, so we carry all this stuff down there. And, her grandmother being the good little proper old, Southern lady and stuff like that, we're carrying all this stuff in. And she looks at my wife and looks at her and says, so he did all this cooking. She goes, yep. He does all the cooking. And and her grandmother, just as innocently as could be, looked at my wife and said, so what do you do then?
And that's why she didn't want to go down there.
So what about you, Hildie? What are the grand traditions you found? You're not escaping the question. What are the grand traditions have you found? Are you going to do a first footing this year?
You know what? I'm thinking about doing that for something. It's coming up New Year, so I might just have to discuss it with hubby and say, hey, we need to plan a first footing. I'll have to look and see historically what day they did it.
New Year's Day.
Was it that day in the morning or the evening?
The morning of New Year's Day, the beginning of the year.
That's going to be Saturday.
So, and the reason for the whiskey is because you're still recovering from New Year's Eve.
Right, and I'll just have to find some people to come here with harps or whatever those things were to come play. Sure, I can whip that together. Why not? I'll post pictures.
I know some pipers around Atlanta.
But my crazy friends, they would throw it together.
All right. Well, I'm only going to let this go so far off the rails because somebody left me in charge. But before we get out of here, we're going to go around the room one more time, let everybody know where to find you, where to find the new books, social media, all of that kind of fun stuff. And so we're going to run in reverse order. Hildie. What?
So you can find me on Facebook, Hildie McQueen. I'm on Instagram as Hildie McQueen Writer. Mostly I'm just on those two. I'm not on much else other than that. Both Bookstar of Light is out now, and The Fox, which is the other holiday story, is up for pre-order right now. So they are both on Amazon, so you can find those there. And other than that, I hope everybody has a great holiday. Send me pictures if you do anything with men in kilts.
Donna?
Well, I like Hildie. I'm on Facebook, and be sure, come and friend me there. I really am not on any other social media. But let's see, what was the other? Oh, what's coming out? I do have Her Heart in His Pocket is out now, and the new anthology about bringing the new, surrounding the new year at Cayman Castle, will be out December the 1st. If I hadn't cleaned up this room for Thanksgiving, I'd actually have covers I could show you, but I can't at the moment. But look for those. They'll both be out on Amazon. They're a lot of fun.
And Piper?
Piper Huguley at my website, so piperhuguley.com, Facebook, Piper G. Huguley. I'm trying to learn Instagram, not very good at it, Piper_Huguley, but mostly I'm on Twitter at Piper Huguley. My first contemporary romance is called Sweet Tea, which is about the descendants of my initial couple that I wrote about in Home to Milford College, is out from Hallmark Publishing and is available anywhere books are sold. So.
Yay.
And I have been trying to herd the chickens. And
Pretty good.
And I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com. I, haunt Facebook some. I will show up occasionally on the Hive of Scum and Villainy, that's Twitter, a little bit of IG, a little bit of this, that, there, and the other. And from Continual, we want to say thank you. We'll see you soon, and happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye. Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.